Hi everybody, welcome to the Platinum membership, and this is the very first training for Platinum members. And according to the survey we've done, many of you want to know more details about how to finance above 70% for the third property, especially in this the new ruling coming out I think 2 years ago, where Bank Negara said that the third residential property, when we invest, if we get loan for that, we cannot get more than 70% if it is your third residential property loan. So we have Dr. Ong here from Singapore, and he has prepared like 30 over slides to talk about this topic. So welcome, Dr. Ong.
Thank you, Casey. Welcome everybody to Platinum membership training. So let's look at what we are going to cover in this training. Today we will discuss about the rule, as Casey said, the 70% third housing loan cap limit imposed by Bank Negara. So we'll go into detail what is this rule about, and also try to understand why did Bank Negara introduce this rule, how does it affect individual investors, and then of course the most important thing everybody wants to know, how to finance above 70% for the third property with the presence of this regulation from Bank Negara. And we will also discuss the risks involved for all the options that we're going to propose to you, and how we are going to manage all these risks involved. So first, what is the rule of 70% third housing loan cap limit? According to Bank Negara, under this regulation, under this rule, there's a limit of a maximum 70% loan to value or LTV ratio to the third house financing facility taken out by an individual borrower. And the rule was effective from 3rd November 2010.
Oh, it's 4 years already.
Yes. So what is so let's look again in the detailed definition. What is the loan to value, the LTV ratio under this rule? In fact, the LTV ratio is a ratio used by banks to express the ratio of a loan to the value of a property. The formula is quite simple. It's the mortgage amount, the loan amount approved by the bank, divided by the appraised value of the property. So for example, if you have a property value at 100,000 and the loan approved is 90K, so the LTV ratio will be 90%. And let's look into detail about the regulation. This rule of 70% third housing loan cap limit is applicable only to individuals. So those company, Sdn Berhad, is so-called not being affected under this rule. And for those only for those individuals with 2 outstanding mortgage loans. So for example, if A has 5 properties but no outstanding loans, and A is not subject to the cap of 70% margin to finance the so-called the 6th property if he currently has 5 properties, because the 6th property, the 6 mortgage loans that A is going to apply is considered as the very first mortgage loan, since the previous 5 properties has no outstanding loans at all.
So as long as you don't have any outstanding loan, then the first loan that you get and the second loan you can get over 70%. There's no problem.
Yes. So
and one thing you mentioned about like company is not subjected to this rule, but actually company, they can, for residential property, they can only loan up to 60%, I think, right?
They have there's based on different banks, they sometimes they for the loan to a company, sometimes it will not be it won't be as high as 90%. Most of the time, the maximum will be about 80 to 85. It depends on the individual banks. Okay. So next we look at the other so-called the scope of this rule is also applicable to any loan application by joint borrowers. So let's use an example. For example, B and C jointly apply for a housing loan, and B has 2 outstanding mortgage loans. So that means that the new loan cap at a maximum 70% margin is applicable to this so-called joint purchase. Then another point we got to know about this rule is only residential houses, only residential properties or apartment, including of service apartments, is so-called affected under this rule.
So even service apartment under commercial title, but is still subjected to this rule because it's for residential purposes.
Yes, and the exception of this rule is it is not applicable to loan taken by a company, as I mentioned just now, and also commercial properties just like offices, factories, warehouses, etc. So we can always check again the press release by Bank Negara at this website if you want to find out more detail about these rules from Bank Negara. So let's look at why the purpose of Bank Negara introducing this rule 4 years ago. First thing first, we have to understand about LTV being a lending risk assessment ratio among banks. So that means that the higher the LTV, the higher risk of the banks is exposed to. And normally high LTV, it comes with a high LTV, it will cost more for the borrower to borrow a loan with high LTV. For example, most of the time they will require the borrower to take up a mortgage insurance because banks want to protect themselves. But it is not the case in Malaysia. It is not compulsory in Malaysia for borrower with a high LTV to so-called secure a mortgage insurance. So with this kind of relaxed housing loan policies in Malaysia, with so-called higher LTV, that all banks are able to so-called approve. It may lead to so-called the same history like last time after the currency crisis, 1997. It will expose most of the banks to bank debt disaster. So one of the consequence of the last time the currency crisis after 1997 was most of the small banks with a lot high bad debt, they were required to merge. So I think that is the biggest concern of Bank Negara. They would try to avoid the history to repeat. So they are imposing this kind of rule to make the overall performance of the bank in terms of bad debt to be as healthy as possible. This is what we learned from the history.
Yeah, which is I think it's a very good move by Bank Negara, because if the investor, basically your house purchaser, if you fork out like 30% down payment, so even if you couldn't repay the mortgage later, and they have to auction out your house, and if they auction at like 70% below market value, they can still recoup all their mortgage. So if there's no bad debt for the bank, this is very good, I think.
Yes. It is for the overall market. It is definitely so-called a kind of a good regulation. But when it comes to individual investor, first thing first, when the government introduce new rules or Bank Negara, we normally will ask ourselves why they got to introduce this kind of restriction to us when we want more properties, we want to have more investment. So let's look at how does this rule affect individual investors from a broader aspect to the individual aspect. So first thing first, in the market, we can see that with the presence of this rule, speculation activities is likely to become lesser and lesser. We have been, I think from our website also, we have been receiving a lot of, like for example, questions and comments from a lot of our investors asking how can they find alternative to borrow more, because we find out that most of the investors, they would like to invest in, for example, new properties just to flip after they got a key with a very minimum capital. So this is considered kind of speculation activities. And we know that speculation activity is actually not healthy for the entire property market. So with this rule introduced by Bank Negara, speculation activity over the 4 years is significantly reduced. I think we can have some statistical data from the government website. And the affordability of homes to those individual home buyers or property investor also, you find that the affordability become better to in all of us as an individual. Because of this rule, speculative activity has been reduced. So you will find that the price of the properties will not so-called spike as before. Because whenever people want to speculate, for example, new houses, they're going to think twice, make sure they are able to finance or they are able to come up with more capital. And in overall, you'll see that the property market stability is how to say, become the market become more stable. So this rule actually contribute to enhance the market stability for property market. But for individual investor, what we concern more is, of course, the average capital required for us now to invest more in properties has been also called increased because of this rule. So then we got to ask ourselves why we want more than 70% loan in the present of this regulation introduced 4 years ago. It's very simple actually. It's a kind of no-brain question because everyone, we want more and more properties with less and lesser capital required. So this is our so-called this day individual desire, one of our so-called our goal, our financial goal in for all the individual investor.
In other words, we want the maximum leverage, right? Buy as much property as we can with the least capital we have.
Yes, because these days more and more people are aware that property is a good type of investment to park our money and for our so-called future retirement plan. But there's one more question we've got to ask ourselves when we say that we want more than 70% loan. Do we really want more than 70% loan for all properties? In other words, are all the properties that we found worth financing for more than 17% loan? Why there's such questions come up? Because when it comes to financing, there are two important types of properties we need to identify before we decide how much we want to borrow. This has been discussed extensively during our Module 7 and Module 8. These two important types of properties are gold finance and no gold finance properties. In other words, simple layman term is those properties worth financing and not worth financing. For those worth financings, we call it gold finance property. A gold finance property is a property that we can expect higher return if we borrow more to buy it. So that's why it's considered worth financing. A no gold finance property is a property with the less money we borrow, we can expect the higher return. So knowing how to differentiate properties are worth and not worth financing is very important to the success in real estate investment, which you can only learn it from this course. Members may want to so-called study again Module 7 to have a better understanding how to use our exclusive gold finance method to identify properties worth financing or not worth financing. We are encouraged to borrow the maximum to buy only gold finance properties. Why? Because the gold finance property provides us the maximum return we can expect through financing or through borrowing. And it also give us a lower risk with more buffer of cash flow when we finance. A gold finance property has more resistance against adverse situations such as a significant increase in interest and a drop in rental income. So this has been demonstrated by some example discussed in Module 8. Also, a gold finance property gives us a cheaper option to invest because the overall cost of finance is relatively lower in terms of return on investment. So gold finance property is the only reason why we want to borrow more than 70%. So in other words, that if we are able to find our fourth property, which is a gold finance property, then we will want to look for alternative to borrow more, because when we are able to borrow more, we can expect higher return. So this explains why some investor or ourselves, we want to borrow more than 70%, even with the rule introduced by Bank Negara for our third property, fourth property, or so on.
Mm-hmm. So it only makes sense to borrow more than 70%,
if you can
more,
find,
as much as possible, yeah. If you can find that gold finance property.
Yes.
Yeah,
So that's
great.
very important. Okay, before we go into detail, the options that we propose to individuals to finance more than 70% for the third property. So let's look again the definition of the rule. The maximum 70% LTV to the third house financing facility taken out by an individual borrower. That is the definition of the rule. From this rule, we highlighted the three keywords: the LTV, the financing facility, and the borrower. So from there, we have three approaches which we can consider to finance more than 70% for our third property onwards. So let's look at each approach one by one. The first one, LTV approach. Why we call it LTV approach? Because using this approach, we actually mark up the purchase price in our sales and purchase agreement at least 30% or higher in order to get a higher LTV, the higher loan to value from the bank. So this approach is quite simple. As you see, just by a sentence, just mark up the purchase price in our S&P at least 30% or higher. So let's look at the example to demonstrate how it can be done. So for example, the agreed purchase price for a property between buyer and seller, let's say 200,000. So for this case, if we use this approach, we have to mark up, let's say 130%. We have marked up 30%. So 130% of this 200,000 will be 260,000. So that will be the purchase price that we're going to put in our S&P, the SPA, Sales and Purchase Agreement. And from the Sales and Purchase Agreement of this value, 260,000 for the property, if bank just approve for up to maximum of 70% based on the rules, 70% cap limit,
Yeah.
you will see that 70% of this 260,000 K is 182,000. And if you divide this 182,000 by the actual purchase price that you pay, which is 200,000, it literally gives you almost 91%. So the effective LTV that we can get from this case is already more than 70%, which is 91%. So sounds quite simple from numbers, but there are some conditions for this so-called approach. First thing first, we must have a trusted lawyer willing to do so. Because for this incident, we are providing some information which is not, for example, the markup price in the sales and purchase agreement, which is not the real numbers of the transaction. So lawyer must be willing to take the risks to draft and to execute that sales and purchase agreement for you. And also at the same time, seller must agree to do so. Why? Because seller may need to pay some so-called the higher capital gain tax.
If they are required to.
Yeah, it depends on the individual case. For example, if they are so-called still within, for example, 5 years or 3 years time to sell the property, and it's already the so-called, they plan properly, the selling price is just to make them so-called no need to pay the property gain tax. But now you mark up the price. You mark up the price for another 30% more. So the selling price now is higher. So they may face so-called the risks to pay the property gain tax.
Yeah.
So this one must let the seller know. Then the third condition is bank must not know about the markup. Yeah, this is very important because in the loan agreement, bank reserve the right to revoke or to cancel the loan approved if they found that any information provided during the application or after the application so-called is not true. So apparently in this approach, we are providing a so-called false information in the sales and purchase agreement, which is already a markup price compared to the actual money that we pay to the seller. Okay.
Yeah.
And one more condition for this approach is bank must accept the property value based on the purchase price in the sales and purchase agreement, because we know that when we apply the loan to buy a house, most of the time bank will have their own valuation. If even their valuation is higher than the purchase price, they will still, based on so-called the purchase price in the sales and purchase agreement as a guideline for the maximum loan they approve. So in this case, the markup price in the sales and purchase agreement, we must make sure that it is accepted as a so-called the property value under the bank's valuation.
So if it is like way over value, then
bank may not. Yes.
Yeah, not many banks will be accepting that.
Yeah, if it's too ridiculous, the markup, the value is so-called higher, way higher than the bank's valuation. Bank reserve the right to approve so-called the maximum amount based on their own valuation if the valuation is lower than the sale and purchase price. Okay. So let's look at the second approach.
I think another point we can talk about. Can you go back to that slide before? Yeah, when we are convincing the seller, it's quite hard to have seller to agree to this, because especially in the case if they are going to pay capital gain tax.
Yes, extra capital gain tax.
Yeah. So what if they don't have to pay capital gain tax? And I guess another type of seller might be suitable for this case is those seller probably they are doing business or something and they have many income that is not declared, but they have the money.
Yeah. Okay.
So so in this case, they make extra money. That means on paper, that means they sell the house at a higher price. So in fact, they make 60,000 more, but the 60,000 is actually it's not coming from you.
Not declared.
It's not declared. And but now it is declared, right? Because he do the transaction. So his money, maybe from his business or then it can be like
he may reconsider whether want to so-called agree on this markup or not. So in this case, we will later discuss as a kind of a risk for this approach. So one of the way that we can what we can do lah. So we will later on in the risk management of this approach later. Okay, we'll come back to this. We'll come back to this question about how to so-called tackle this so-called extra real property gain tax from the seller side, if we really want to take this approach. So
nice.
Now we move on to the second approach, using the financing facility. Okay, for this approach, first we got to buy the so-called the third property with 100% cash first, and then obtain a valuation at least 30% higher than the initial purchase price that we paid. After that, we refinance the property with just 70% loan cap on the higher valuation. So the end up, the so-called the total loan amount that we got is actually equivalent to 90% loan based on the initial purchase price. Let's look at this using example again. For example, we use the 100% cash to buy just now the house, the 200,000. We are able to get 260,000 valuation from bank. We use that valuation to refinance 70% from the bank. So 70% of 260,000 is equal to 182,000, and we know that this is actually if the effective LTV based on 182,000 divided by the 200,000 that we paid for the house is equivalent to 91% of the LTV ratio. So this is another example, another approach.
Yeah, quite interesting way. It basically means that you do step 2, right? You basically finance the house first on your own, then you get back to step 1 to get loan from bank.
Yes.
Okay.
So this is a different way. So in this way, we got to buy the house with 100% cash first instead of buy the house with the loan money from the bank. Then we refinance later. So taking this approach, also the conditions is we must be sure that we will be able to get higher valuation for the property that we buy. So we got to think of the way, or we got to do our homework before that to make sure got other banks or some banks so-called able to value that property at a higher value than what we paid to buy the house. And the second thing is we must make sure that owner of the house or buyers of the house is able to refinance with banks. So these are the main 2 conditions for anyone want to take this second approach.
I guess it's very important to have the cash also, which most people don't have.
100% cash. So maybe I should put that into this one of the conditions. 100% cash must be prepared. That's for sure. Let's move on to the third approach, borrower approach. In this approach, if you are using single name in the sales and purchase agreement to buy a property, try this approach is to use another individual name with less than 2 outstanding mortgage loan. So that means that we use other people's name who has less than 2 outstanding loans to buy our third property. So of course, this individual must be someone that we trust, someone that we know very well, that you can entrust that you pay the money, you pay the capital, but ownership is under other people's name. Well, some people normally will think joint names, so-called to secure part of their ownership also. If we use a joint name using this approach, that means we still got to find other individual with less than 2 outstanding mortgage loan to buy our third property. But in this case, we will assign that second owner as the main borrower of a third-party mortgage loan. We will discuss in detail what is the third-party mortgage loan. So this is a kind of loan that allow us to so-called get more than 70% for our third property. If you are able to join them with, we are able to find a second owner who has less than 2 outstanding mortgage loans. So for example, if A has 2 outstanding mortgage, but B has none, and A and B buy a house with joint names. So B, as the owner under this third-party loan, is not restricted by the 70% cap limit of LTV. So he's able to borrow more than 70% LTV. The condition for this is, of course, second owner must have less than 2 outstanding mortgages, and bank, we must find a bank allow the application of a third-party mortgage loan. So what is a third? Yes.
Yeah, you are going to talk about third-party loan right now.
Yes.
Okay, let's go to that.
Yeah, let's go into what is a third-party mortgage loan. Third-party mortgage loan officially is called a third-party first legal charge mortgage loan. For this kind of mortgage loan, one owner's name and the eligibility of the owner, for example, the age for the tenure, the credit limit for the so-called maximum amount of loan approved, to apply for the financing facility. for this kind of third party, we have to know that these days banks are very selective. It's not in their favor of for this kind of third party loan. So extensive research will have to be done to
because it is, to the eyes of the bank, it's like they are taking on because
higher risk.
Higher risk, because there are two buyers of the properties, but we are limited to only go after the loan on one person, right?
Yeah. If there's any so-called dispute or any default in future, banks can only pursue one owner only. So they mean they literally so-called forego the charge to the other owner, the first owner.
Yeah.
So that's why they are very selective over this third-party mortgage loan application. And the requirements for this kind of loan actually vary among banks. Most of them most of the banks, they are concerned about the commitment of the so-called all the applicants.
Yeah.
So they prefer those commitment-free individuals with a good credit record in terms of the secrets. So for example, those retiree, students, etc. So those individuals to the banks are commitment, so-called less commitment individual. They may have a better chance to so-called to successfully apply for this kind of third-party loan.
You mean like A and B is getting a loan? You mean B should be retiree or students, or the A is
yes, the second. That's the second. The applicants
should be retiree
the
or
loan.
student. But I see the problem is maybe they don't have the income like a retired student. So how do they get a loan, right?
So now we're just concerned about how to get the loan. So what the limitation by the individual, for example, the credit limits or the income. So do you have to think of other way? For example, if you are using a student's name to apply for a third party, it's commitment free. So bank is thinking that the risk is lower, but they also consider the student has no income or low income. So in that case, maybe need a guarantor. So the first owner may come into the picture as a guarantor to the loan. So using the so-called the financial strength of the other owner to substantiate the application. That is one of the example. Yeah. So now it's just pertaining to this approach to get that third-party loan in order to finance more than 70% loan. So to get the approval, there is another so-called another story. That's why the requirements vary among banks. So we have to do our own research to understand their individual requirement and try to so-called to comply to it and get the so-called approval in the first place. So from what we understand in the market right now is we only know 3 banks are doing this third-party mortgage loan. Of course, if members, other banks also so-called do this kind of third-party loan, we welcome you to so-called post in our website so that we can share with other members. So Alliance Bank, UOB Bank, and OCBC Bank. These are the 3 banks that, as far as we know, in the market, still doing third-party. Previously, CMB also.
I think RHB also have.
RHB also have, but I think RHB is going to merge with CMB, right?
That's
latest news that
okay. The story not firm yet.
So maybe if RHB is also doing, maybe if you have any intention, better quickly apply now. We don't know if they will change the policy after the merger.
I think another concern is the bank also they look at the relationship between the joint owner as well.
Yeah, that may be some of the requirement.
Like OCBC, I understand that they don't allow like your relation is too far away.
Yes, no relation.
So like cousin, like cousin, probably they don't want. But if you like brother, sister, siblings, or father and son, immediate family, then that should be fine.
Yes. So we have to find out what are the so-called other requirements for banks to approve this kind of loan, even they do this kind of third-party loan. Okay. So now let's look at the risks. All the potential risks involved in come with every approach. Let's look at the first approach of the markup, the LTV approach. Higher purchase price may exceed bank's valuation. This I think we mentioned previously. If you mark up too high, that may exceed bank's valuation. So bank may fall back to their so-called the lower value of the property to approve the maximum loan amount. Second is seller may need to pay extra real property gain tax. I think this one brought up by Casey just now also. Banks has the right to revoke the loan for false info given. Yeah, this one I think I mentioned just now previously also, because the markup price, the markup purchase price in the sales and purchase agreement is actually different from the actual price, the actual amount that we pay to the seller. Number 4 is seller may back off of the agreed arrangement. The agreed arrangement meaning that he may agree in the first place for us to mark up, but later maybe he has his own lawyer or his own friend showing him the risks or explain to him the risks whatever, or extra tax that he's going to pay. Then he may back off even after he agreed, because this kind of arrangement, there's no so-called obligation between the seller and the buyer. It's still just based on the sales and purchase agreement. So this is one of the risks, unless you get so-called the certainty from the seller that he is okay with the arrangement. Otherwise, he can back out anytime before the deal is closed. The 5th risk is unable to find a trusted lawyer to perform the transfer. So this normally should be done in the first place. You must be able to find a lawyer to do this kinds of markup in the SPA or U. So how we manage this risks if you are taking this approach? We will only take this approach after we have a confirmed valuation from bank. So this can be done if you know some bankers that are so-called doing mortgage application in different banks. You can just maybe provide them some details on, like for example, the address and the renovation of the property. So most of the time, this banker, they are able to get some value, some preliminary value from the panelist of their valuer. So that will give an idea of the valuation from the bank. But for a confirmed valuation, normally you have to apply. You have to apply based on the agreement. So there's a so-called a time effect here. For a confirmed valuation from the bank, so it comes with a so-called the sale SMP executed. But the SMP, the sales and purchase agreement, before you sign and execute it, you must so-called make sure you have the so-called confident to get the kind of high valuation. So here, the confirmed valuation from bank means that we can use so-called more bankers to look for valuation. For example, if you're able to find 3 banks all have no problem to meet that markup valuation, for example, just now the case 260,000 for the house, then there should be a kind of so-called a confirmed valuation from bank to us.
At least you know several banks are recognizing that, right?
Yeah, yes. In case one so-called after you apply, they reject or they can't give you the kind of amount, maybe you can fall back to the other one. Okay, the second so-called second approach that we need to take to manage the risks, if you take this LTV approach, is we only take this approach after seller agrees. So in this case, just like the problem that Casey mentioned, that when the seller find out that he's going to pay the extra the tax, which he so-called previously maybe have other way to so-called to get away from the tax. So one of the way we manage is try to convince the seller that we are paying the so-called extra gain tax. So that is based on the extra gain tax is based on the, for example, just now the case 200 to markup to 260,000. You just based on that 60,000 markup. If that 60,000 markup incur any so-called gain tax to the seller, then we can propose that we pay that extra gain tax on behalf of the seller. So in this case, we must calculate, so-called, we need information from the seller also. So then we will have an idea actually how much the extra gain tax the seller is going to pay. Then we can decide whether is it worth it or not for us to go ahead. Okay, the third thing here to take note is only when there's a trusted lawyer willing to do so. Yes. If you can't find a lawyer know about this kind of approach, or not familiar at all, or think that they don't want to risk their so-called their reputation or whatever, then it will be very difficult for you to so-called execute the sales and purchase agreement. They may maybe just tell you to find other lawyer to do so. So before you are thinking of taking this approach, do the research, ask around people, and try to ask other friends or even a few lawyers, and see whether they are able or they have any experience to do this kind of transaction with the markup. Number 4, lawyer must document all arrangement in black and white. This is pertaining to the arrangement between seller and buyers. Because, for example, if you are willing to pay extra gain tax for the seller, and seller agree, but without anything documented in black and white, then the seller may not feel secure. Okay. Then in return, we also don't have anything in black and white. We also may not feel secure that the seller may back off any time from the deal or from the arrangement. Okay. So this we need lawyer to help us to document all this arrangement in black and white.
So is this going to be like a separate agreement?
No. Normally, it's, for example, through some so-called, like, for example, communication, like email, or for example, some receipt. So, for example, the money that we pay as a so-called extra gain tax to the seller, as long as we have a receipt for the lawyer. Lawyer is just like a middleman. It's like a middleman to because they have to protect themselves also. So it's more important about those the transaction of the money for the lawyer, so-called as a proof to us that we pay this amount to the lawyer for this transaction. But the purpose and the so-called the account for those money the lawyer receive is up to them. But at least there's a proof in black and white as a receipt from us to protect them, to protect ourselves. That this is the cost that we pay to the lawyer pertaining to this transaction. So this is some kind of proof in black and white we call, pertaining to the arrangement that we agree. Because if we follow the so-called the actual sales and purchase, the execution and the transaction, there may not be this necessary extra cost. But because of this special arrangement of the markup and special arrangement of the agree to pay, for example, extra tax, so we need some protection in black and white. So normally, whatever money the lawyer receive, they go to so-called make sure they have a black and white receipt issued to us. Even it's not mentioned in the purpose, because some lawyer they may not want to so-called put more put their name into it, this kind of arrangement. So, but at least you have that kind of black and white proof to protect yourself, especially those money that you so-called you pass to the lawyers for the arrangement.
Okay.
So number 5, double check the calculation of cost and proceeds, especially when you got to pay extra tax, and also the transactions, because like for example, the first release of the loan, the second release of the loan, all the numbers we have to double check ourselves, because the actual money that we receive will be different from the numbers if we derive from the market price, the sell and purchase agreement. Lawyer as a middleman, they will do all this kind of so-called, they will do all the calculation. So after then they receive the loan amount, then they will do so-called to release the actual money with the arrangement to sellers and buyers also.
Yeah.
So this one we got to do our own calculation because it cannot be stated so-called officially in their bill.
So you yourself, you got to be check and balance to actually make sure.
Yeah, double sure that this is the amount that we expect to be received, or this is the amount that we expect to pay, and is correct. Because the arrangement, I said, the markup price in the SPA is not the actual price agreed to be paid to the seller.
Will there be a risk that when the seller actually come back say, hey, you didn't pay enough down payment for my
yes. So that's why we need the number 4, the lawyer, to cover that. So lawyer will have to issue the receipt as a proof. For example, the issuance or, for example, a voucher, whatever, they already paid to the seller to settle that percentage or whatever. So that's what we need from the lawyer as a proof to protect ourselves. Even though we never actually pay the extra 60,000, for example, the markup, but it's already catered for, and the lawyer has already proved that the amount of money has been received by the seller. So this one we have to be careful. First is the number. Second one is all the document and the proof.
All the document numbers and the document.
Yeah, to protect ourselves. Okay.
Yeah, I think one thing I want to elaborate here is when we talk about the seller, there's one type of seller probably they will most likely agree to this kind of arrangement because if imagine that if I'm doing a business, so I all the time maybe I under declare my income, so I actually pay less income tax. But in fact I have money, so I have income parked somewhere. But I don't want to I don't want to declare that money because I'm going to, let's say, pay more income tax for that. So in that case, if I have a house and you mark up it and I sell it markup price to you, then it's like I'm making extra money, and that money doesn't have to be taxed. Say the house is over 5 years, so the capital gain tax is tax free. So the money I get, like 60,000, that extra actually is I didn't get it, but it's like say it bluntly, it's like money laundering lah. This is not
tax shelter.
Yeah, tax shelter lah. So this kind of seller might be suitable for this kind of arrangement.
Yes.
Right.
So it's no harm for us to propose to the seller. So and it's up to the individual seller to evaluate whether they want to take this approach or not. But first thing first, we have to get the agreement first before we are thinking of taking this approach. But of course, before that also, we have to do our own homework. Make sure it is worth it for us to go ahead with this approach.
So by the way, just a disclaimer here, if you are not comfortable with this kind of arrangement, you don't have to do it.
Yes, better don't take this approach.
Yeah, because that it's like gray area, right? You want to
it's a gray area. Yes, it is a gray area.
Flood the bank, right?
Bank will not sue you. It's not a legal so-called offense. But as in stated in the loan agreement, bank will reserve the right. Once they find out that you are giving them false information, they will so-called withdraw all the loan that released to you. So that is the risk that we could manage. If you are taking this approach, okay?
Okay, fair.
So let's go towards the risks involved for the second approach, using the refinancing, the upfront 100% cash required. Yeah, this is the biggest risk. You got to find way and means to prepare that cash in advance if you are taking this approach. Then the second risk is it may take longer time for us to receive the money from the loan, even we are able to refinance it. And that we know that time equals to money. If it's a big amount that for that 100% cash, if it's a very big amount, so we may have to factor in the so-called opportunity cost that we lost during that time. And the third risk is higher valuation is not guaranteed. Yes. So that's why we got to do our homework to make sure in advance we are able to, we have the confidence to get that kind of so-called higher valuation for that property that we're going to refinance. The last one is we may need extra costs of renovation to get the higher valuation. Yeah, this is in case that after we ask around from different banks, we know that the valuation for the property is there, but we need higher valuation in order for us to get so-called the effective loan to be higher than 70%. Then we may need to consider to do some renovation in order to increase the value of the property for us to refinance later. So to manage all the risks discussed for this approach, first thing first, we must make sure we have the exit strategy, because we are using 100% cash to buy that property in the first place. Make sure if anything happen, we are able to hold the property or even to sell the property if we are not able to refinance later or not able to refinance to the value that we want. So that's why confirmation of refinance from more banks beforehand is very important. So this confirmation again is not so-called the letter of offer that we receive from banks. It's just like the valuation that we are able to confirm with bankers. At least what we know some bankers, and we let them know this property details, and also they know our so-called the financial strength. So beforehand, they will be able to give us some confidence that he's able to get us the approval of refinance from their bank. So this kind of so-called confirmation, unofficial confirmation, we got to make sure it's done before we buy the property with 100% cash.
Okay, Dr. Ang, suddenly your mic become like quite soft. Probably you can speak out louder.
Louder?
I think. Yeah.
Is it okay?
Just speak louder,
okay?
should be fine.
Okay. So the second risk, is this clear? Was it clear?
Yeah. Let's go on to.
Let's go on. Okay, number 3. Okay, number 3, the risks involve the valuation from more banks. Okay, the valuation, because it's not guaranteed, so beforehand it's better for us to ask around the bank. Okay, ask around more banks. Make sure there are some banks, a minimum 2 or 3, able to provide so-called the loan based on the valuation that we expect, the higher valuation that we expect. Then the last one, again, double check the calculation of costs and proceeds. So like those extra costs may be needed for renovation. We got to calculate all this in, make sure that is worth it for us to spend as part of the cost, and end up with still worth for us to finance more than that 70% for that property. Okay, for the last approach, risks involved for those different individual trust level between the two owners. Okay, of course, because you are using other people's name, you are putting your money, but you are not getting the entire ownership for the property that you buy. So trust level between the two owners is very important. Most of the time will be your close relative, younger one, your friends, even your close friends. So these are most of the individuals that we will consider to use this approach, to use their name. Second, credit records and limit of the second owner. I think this one we mentioned just now. For example, that if the second owner is a student, the credit limit may be a problem. Then if the second owner, previously they have any case of default in their installment or whatever, or credit card problem, so their credit record may become a problem for the application of the third-party loan. The third one is, of course, the more and more stringent requirements from bank on this third-party loan, because we know that they are also taking higher risks to approve this kind of loan. So how are we going to manage all these risks? Number 1, make known to the second owner all potential risks. So even if we have very high trust level, even if we trust the owner very well, but we are still obligated to let this second owner know all the potential risks. We should let him or her know how the risks and also the loan are being managed. We use that to buy the property for rental and whatever, and the potential risks of that is maybe we can't find a tenant in a very short term, but we are still able to service the monthly installment. So all these risks we must make known to the second owner because his name as used as a borrower. So if anything happen, the bank will come after him or her. So he's definitely deserve the right to know all the potential risks involved.
Mm-mm.
Number 3, perform a credit or a secret check on the second owner with Bank Negara. If you are not so sure the so-called the financial background of the second owner, even he or she is the closest one to us, we can always perform a secret check with Bank Negara, but just go to Bank Negara and apply for that check with so-called IC of the second owner. We should be able to get the credit record, and from there.
I think Bank Negara, they only allow the owner themselves to check their own securities, right? You couldn't check on a third party unless you are doing through some.
Yes. Then you got to bring the second owner to apply that.
They have to.
They have to.
They have to be present for that, right?
Yes. To bring them along to apply for that credit for the credit check lah.
Mm-hmm.
So this is as a so-called a precaution just to make sure that for the loan to be approved, to have a higher chance for the loan to approve, so that you won't choose the wrong name. Because once you put the name in the sale and purchase agreement and also in the loan application, it's and the approval you got it not the so-called not approval, the execution of the S&P is already there. It will cost you some money if you want to remove that name or change the name.
Yeah.
And you also take longer time also for the transaction. So make sure you choose the right name in the first place.
Mm-hmm.
Number 4, as I mentioned just now, if the credit limit of the second owner is insufficient, it's not enough for you to apply for the loan, so you may need a guarantor if that problem happens. Number 5, homework. Shop around for confirmation from banks to secure a third-party loan. So got to look around in the market what kind of bank other than, for example, the 3 banks that we mentioned plus RSB. Try to look for as many as possible and get more information from the banker about their requirements. Make sure with your second owner's qualification is able to get that loan approved in the first place before you approach the seller or before you approach the second owner to use his name to buy that property. Okay, since I think we finished discuss the risks involved for every single method. Now let's look at what is the biggest risk. Actually, this is my personal opinion.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, for individual investor, we have always struggled with our own individual desire to have more properties and with less money come out. And at the same time, we know that this regulation actually is good for the overall property market by providing some regulation on the speculative activities and make homes more affordable and also make the entire market more stable. But here I want to highlight again that actually the biggest risk is this question: do we really have to finance so-called more than 70% loan for all our properties? So I think we discussed before that make sure if that is a gold finance, there's a property that is worth for us to go for a maximum loan for a maximum return. Yeah. So with that in mind, always have this question to ask ourselves before we thinking, are we going to loan more? By asking this question to ourselves, we are actually reducing our own risks, even other people's risks, even the second owner's risks or whatever. If that is property is really a worth financing property, it gives you higher return, it gives you secure cash flow, or it really reduces the risks for you to service the loan, for you to service the installment, and for you to so-called no need to bother about the exit strategy, because you would know that you have the ability to hold the property with just using the income generated by that property, and you know that that is so-called enough buffer provided by the property, because it's a gold finance property. It gives you enough cash flow to buffer in case there's a hike in interest rate, or even if the market softens, then you got to lower your rental. So stick to this question to ask ourselves, is that a property that worth for us to apply for more than 70% loan before we think of the which approach that we want to take to get more than 70% loan.
Yeah, nicely said. So basically it means we should invest responsibly.
Yeah.
Then it's good. It's also good for the market and also good for your own financial health. If you are taking on too much risk, then you might be risk losing money at the end.
Yes. We have seen many of our friends, people that we know, taking the risk even to buy new projects, go through a maximum leverage, and expose themselves to a higher risk. They're not sure whether they're able to generate cash flow. They're not sure whether there's a property that worth for them to finance. Then when the market situation change, then they will turn into a panic situation. So that loan, previously they try so hard to get the loan approved, now become a nightmare to them. regretted.
Yeah.
So try to
Yeah, in
avoid
fact,
that.
like this year is really a lot of project is completed, and of course the secondary transaction is not catching up. No, it's not like what is happening previous 2 years. So it might be quite hard to find buyer right now,
Yes,
and we can start to see that those people who are over leveraged, then
yes.
they're putting them
Find
in a
themselves,
very
yeah.
stressful position.
Very stressful. Yeah, can't sleep well at night. So that is not what we want.
Yeah.
So that's why I said the biggest risk is always ask ourselves, is the property that we found really good enough for us to take out as much loan as possible before we even think of which approach for us to finance more.
Yeah.
So that is the question that help us to reduce the risks. Okay, so this is what we have discussed for this today's training. We talk about the rules, then we talk about the purpose of Bank Negara introducing that, and we also talk about the effect to our individual investor. Then we share with you the 3 approaches that we can take if you are able to find property worth for us to finance more than 70%. And also we discuss individual approach, there are risks involved, and how we can manage it. So if you have any questions, if you have any comment about this training, do feel free to feedback to us.
Okay, I think that's another point mentioned by one of our attendees here. Since this rule is not affecting commercial property, so you can also look for investment as well, right?
Yes.
So it doesn't have to be stuck just on residential only.
Yes. Because from what I observe, most of the readers or most of the members that ask about this question is those very interested to buy particularly new projects, new residential project. Yeah. So that's why I think also it's a good time for us to introduce into detail the discussion about these rules and the options also, and also as particularly the risks, individual risks involved. So for commercial property, those investors, I think, quite experienced one, when they embark into buying a commercial property, they should know quite well about those risks involved. And also there's a cap for those commercial property by bank also. You can't loan more than that. So or for those experienced investor in commercial property, they could do more homework, they could do more calculation to so-called calculate the risks involved. It's only for those beginner or for those investor who are so-called really want to take higher risks in the so-called the booming or the property market, to flip or to buy new property. Those are really so-called risky in terms of thinking of to finance more than 70% or to go against this regulation.
Yeah. Good. So thank you all for attending this Platinum
Thank you.
training.
Thank you very
So
much.
we will have every training on the third Friday of the
Friday.
month.
Okay.
Yeah, so if there is a change, we will definitely inform you through email. So thanks everyone for logging in, and
Thank you. Thank
we
you very
will
much.
see you in the members area. Bye bye.
Bye.